Welcome to the Beyond Physio podcast. I'm Dr. Jerry Yoo, CEO and founder of Nexella Physio. And on my show today, I have a very special guest. I have Chris Newport, who is not only a registered dietitian, she's an exercise physiologist, triathlon coach, and the owner of the Endurance Edge, which is a well-known local triathlon club in the Cary area in North Carolina. Chris, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Chris, I want to know all about how you got into these varied professional endeavors, because it's quite a colorful history you have here.
Yes. So being an athlete as a kid, I knew that I wanted to pursue athletics going forward. So I actually started in athletic training and found out that that was not what I wanted to pursue. Much respect to them, but knew I still wanted to be in fitness. So that's when I became a personal trainer and then switched schools many times to my parents' chagrin, and finally landed actually on a business management degree because I wanted a kind of a broad background.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that, was training and then figuring out, man, there's so much misinformation about nutrition. So when I finished my business degree, then I went back to school for nutrition and pursued my license in that field. And while I was there, met my mentor at Meredith College, who supported me as, becoming an exercise physiologist too.
That's amazing.
So in the metabolic testing and all that stuff. So then been able to kind of mash it all together into the Endurance Edge.
That's cool. Now, it sounds like you had this entrepreneurial mindset. Was that always there for you even back in the day?
Looking back on it, probably. I mean, I kind of, I'm like, I sort of like to do my own thing and like have my own flavor of things. So yeah, I think it's kind of always been there.
That's awesome. I think for me, I was not confident, although it's funny, in my line of family, everyone's an entrepreneur.
Really?
So it's almost like it's in my blood.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of like fought that for a while until I had the opportunity to do something on my own. And now I'm like, I can't go back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why didn't I do it sooner on my own?
Yeah. And I'm like totally the opposite. My family was like, entrepreneurship. That's crazy. You need a job and a pension yeah. So they finally, probably maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, they finally stopped giving me a hard time about like, you need a job. They're like, oh, okay, she's still gonna do this. I'm like, yeah, sorry guys.
That's a great story. Do you have any other entrepreneurs in your family then, aside from?
No.
Not at all. Not
Zero.
In the family.
Teacher, pilot.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
That's awesome. Now, are you a native North Carolinian?
No.
You don't sound like you are. That's why I had to ask.
No. Yeah, my dad was in the military, so we moved
A lot.
all over the place, which was awesome because then we got to travel and do it. And I think that's just what I've learned over time, that I just like different things, which is great for entrepreneurship because you're doing so many different things.
Absolutely. You know what's cool about your business model is that, yes, there are many things that you're doing, but everything's under that same umbrella of working with the athlete, the person who wants to really take care of their health.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So let's go into kind of like your expertise. And there are common questions that I'm sure you get asked a lot by...
You probably get asked them too.
I did too. Yes. It's funny because I've done triathlon for many years myself. I took a break this past year because I just wanted to decompress and focus on my businesses. But it's definitely still part of my heart and soul.
Sure.
But what's cool is that as we're doing our recovery and our rehab with our clients, what we often find is that there are a lot of issues that I think there's a lot of, I don't know if parlay is the word, but where we actually want to involve people who are in other fields, specialties.
Absolutely.
Because everything affects the rehab process. One of our other shows we did with Tara Herman, we talked about how protein is often a very neglected macronutrient, and people often overestimate how much protein they take in. They're like, oh, I thought I was taking enough. And really for that activity level, they're not. Yeah. Do you also find the case in athletes that you work with?
Absolutely. I would say of all the macronutrients, that's probably, like you had mentioned, one of the most neglected. Although when we really get down to it, I tell people, the biggest complaint I get is that people just get sick of chewing. They're like, oh my God, I can't eat anymore, which is why, convenience items like protein powders, and you don't have to do protein powders, but it's really a convenient thing to get in a lot of protein in a short amount of time.
Now, for the athlete that you have who is looking to get recovered quicker, Is there a recommendation? I'm familiar with familiar guidelines as far as what protein intake people should have.
Sure.
Is there anything that's optimal for triathletes, for example, who are always just freaking burning calories and whatnot?
Yeah, so we think in grams of protein per kilogram of body weight.
Sure.
I know a lot of people are like per pound, but yay for the U.S. not being on the metric system to make all of our brains hurt. Anyway, what we see the government's recommendation is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That is to be sure you're disease-free. Obviously, with triathlon or whatever sport you're doing, it's very, it's a little bit more intense on the body, and you just have to support that muscle protein synthesis and support that recovery, especially 40 plus, and especially, for example, like menopausal women who need to be caring for the bones and, our masters athletes and that kind of thing. So anyway, then our needs go up. So typically I can convince pretty easily a triathlete to do 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kg of body weight, but usually I have a hard time convincing them to go much over that. But that's where a lot of people are like, wanting to lose those last 5 pounds. And that's kind of where the magic happens. So
that's awesome. Now, with the other macronutrients, do you kind of follow sort of a program where it's like 40, 30, 30, as far as ratios go? Is there one that's ideal for triathletes?
It really is client to client. We do genetic testing too and micronutrient testing in our office. So that guides us as it relates to macronutrients. Some people are a little bit more sensitive to cholesterol or certain types of fat and what's happening inside their body. So if I were to generalize it, I would say probably somewhere between 20 and 30% from protein. And then the other two, we just kind of fill in. We don't want to shortchange our carbs, but we also don't want to shortchange our fat. So there's flexibility there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As far as the negative effects of overproteinating, I don't know too many people actually overdo it. And people think, oh, I don't want to run my kidneys. But it's really hard to do that unless you have some sort of really chronic illness there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally. It's not going to hurt your kidneys, assuming that you don't already have a kidney issue. And assuming you're also hydrating, it's actually very supportive of like bones, and everybody's like, oh, you're gonna deplete your calcium, and you're not.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's great. So a lot of athletes that we see, and we have a number of people on our tri team who often complain about getting cramps, and I want to dive into that because there's a lot of information out there about why we even get cramps in the first place.
Sure.
Some of it's actually more at the nervous system level. Other people complain about the electrical level. Is there a place that you stand on this, or that you have found diving into the science there?
Well, since we do sweat testing, obviously we're going to lean into more of the electrolyte side, but absolutely it's a nervous system thing too, right? Especially my swimmers who are like, my calves are cramping. I'm like, well, you're plantar flexed, and you're just the whole time, your muscle's going to be like, what the heck is going on? And it's going to seize up. So that certainly is, that's part of training though.
Yes.
Right. So, and training at the intensity that you will be racing at. And that's typically, the overload of the muscle. It's going to freak out. Yeah. But we try to cover our bases as it relates to the correct electrical signaling via diet. So being that we sweat test, as you might imagine, we see some pretty heavy sweat losses.
Absolutely.
Sodium is the one that's lost really, and it's the most important because of that cell signaling, that potassium, sodium, right? I would say from like on average, most men and women are actually pretty similar to what we've seen in our testing, but men tend to lose more volume than women. So yes, and this is one of those things. As I started my practice, I was like, these people are still cramping. Like, let's just take more salt. Let's just take more salt. I was like, okay, we got to find an answer here. Yeah. So then dove into the research, got into the sweat testing, and now it's like game changer.
Time dialed in.
Totally. Wow. Totally. And then helping people determine like what is the dew point, how much are they going to be losing, because your fluid and electrolyte and the loss need to go together. Mm-hmm. Where a lot of people, I'd say, kind of mess up a little bit, and unintentionally, is that they're like, here's my plan, and it's the same plan regardless of the weather, the conditions. Yes. So they're like, well, I'm always supposed to be doing a bottle an hour or whatever. I'm like, the temperature is 20 degrees hotter and the dew point is much higher. Then you're losing more volume because your core temperature is going higher and then your body has to cool itself and it loses more. So now we need more fluid and electrolytes, but we don't necessarily need more carbs. In fact, that carb need actually can go down a little bit. So those are the three pieces that are crucial for appropriate hydration.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes one of those is off. So
interesting. So then I know, I was actually surprised, but I had a sweat test done, I think it was a year or two ago. And I was actually surprised that my numbers were low because I feel like, my hats are just like caked with salt.
Yeah.
T-shirts, everything just stained with salt stains.
Yeah.
So that was actually surprising. And one of our other guys who's a heavy sweater, he actually didn't have that much salt loss, which we thought was like, what?
Yeah.
It's crazy. So I think what you're saying about the volume and also the...
Did you sweat during your actual sweat test?
I didn't actually sweat.
Okay, that's important. We don't want it to be like a CF test.
So, because I just sat there with the...
Yep. Yeah.
So then do you actually
Don't get tricked.
do you actually do that during...
Yeah, we patch people up. We actually collect their actual sweat.
Wow, they're doing it.
Yeah, so it's not a cystic fibrosis test. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Well, CF test, you're going to be sitting there just...
Correct. Which is great for CF, right?
Yes.
But
absolutely.
not for athletes.
You know what? Now I have to do a retest, and I think I know where I need to go.
Yes, so that we can actually confirm this, like, really, where you go well.
Yes.
And I have had people who, you look at them. I had one guy in my lab the other day. I swear, he was like, I'm a really heavy sweater. I'm like, I hear that all the time. Come on. And literally, it was like a cartoon. You know, that when the cartoons start to sweat, they literally he was like exploding. I was like, oh my, I had to move the cart. I had to move myself away from it. I was like, oh my God, this guy is everywhere. And he really wasn't that salty.
No way.
Yeah. He was just so, because electrolyte loss is like your fingerprint.
Mm-hmm.
It's very unique to the person.
So and that's regardless of condition. Or
Correct.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So we see that maybe there might be some shifts in menopause just based on fluid differences, but and your quantity that you sweat, because you had mentioned, you have those friends who you're like, oh my God, you are sopping wet, and then there's the other friend who's like, did you sweat
or how?
Yeah, so it's very different. Fluid loss is very different, and electrolyte loss is the same thing.
Got it.
Like I said, it's like your fingerprint.
Now, is that the same case, Chris, for hydration too? Is there a genetic component to that, or is it really there are many, as much information out there half your body weight and whatnot for the average person, but to someone athletic, you got to be taking more than that.
Yes. So hydration's an interesting one because our kidneys are all our processing speed is all kind of different, if you will. But at the end of the day, there's not a hard and fast you need to be drinking X number of ounces per pound, or that's a myth.
Yeah.
Yep. Even in a clinical setting, there is some challenge there as to that's a little bit of a different story, however. But following your urine color is one of your best things that you could do. And then knowing that most women generally sweat or lose, in terms of total amount of fluid, about 64 ounces, and men generally lose about 100 ounces. When it's hot out, it's going to be more. So that's a good starting point, as drink at least this much, and you're going to get some from food. Hopefully you're eating your fruits and vegetables. Cough, cough. So have to, put in my my promo. Yes. So, but yeah, there's no perfect formula of you need to be drinking X amount per day.
Yeah.
And I hate that, because as triathletes, we're so data driven. Did I meet my 100 ounces today? I'm like,
my cadence off.
Yes. So, but are you thirsty? Yeah. Have you not? Is your urine really dark yellow? Go drink.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about, as we talk about hydration, I'm thinking a lot of people ask, what exactly, when we talk about electrolytes, what role do they really play in maintaining athletic performance, especially endurance athletes? And what are some ways that they can actually avoid those imbalances without maybe getting sweat tests first?
Yeah.
Something they can do sort of DIY kind of thing?
Yes, for sure. So you can test on your own your fluid losses. So, and we have a chart that we use with our sweat testing clients. It's an Excel spreadsheet.
No.
You can do this on your own. Basically, we'll have people do their date, their time, their pre-weight, and their post-weight, and then how much fluid they consumed If they peed, really hard to measure that, but I did have someone point that out that was missing on my spreadsheet. So I was like, I will add this, I will add that in.
You want to.
Exactly. And then putting, if you can, the temperature and the humidity or the dew point. You can just find that on your phone if you can. And if it's indoor, typically humidity is pretty tightly in a pretty... and then just keep track and also do the activity and then whatever the intensity of the activity was. So that's a good way for you to determine, like, what is my overall fluid loss? And then how much do I need to put back in? Losing anywhere between 1% and 2% of body weight is totally normal and expected and fine. If we are drinking too much and you're gaining weight, that's a huge problem. That's a massive red flag. So that can lead us to something like hyponatremia, which is far more dangerous than dehydration.
For sure.
So that's a good place to start, especially if you are like, wow, I lose a lot. Like, okay, well, let's actually start tracking it. And you don't necessarily have to be super nitpicky about it like we are in the lab. Like if you weigh with your shoes on, no big deal. Weigh before and after with your shoes on.
Right.
If you don't want to measure how much you drink, weigh with your water bottle in your hand before and afterwards.
Sure.
So that way you at least get the delta of how much you lost. And that gives you an idea of your sweat rate and making sure, okay, I need to be putting this much back in to avoid that 1% to 3% loss or 1% to 2% loss. So that's like kind of a nice place to start. If you're doing any exercise over 90 minutes, you want to start to include electrolytes. So that namely is sodium, but also potassium, magnesium, and calcium. There's a lot of different products on the market. We're not married to any of them. But, at the end of the day, it has to be something that you like and that you'll actually drink. If you taste it and you're like, this is gross, then it ain't the product for you. Sorry.
Different ratios too, even between sodium and potassium. Is there one so it sounds like sodium should be higher no matter what?
Yes.
Versus potassium.
Yeah. And chloride. You want to, so AKA salt.
That's right, exactly.
Yep. But yes, potassium is going to be relatively low as it relates to people's variations in sodium losses.
Right.
So, but not to say that I'm plugging this product, but we've had a lot of athletes do really well in salt stick products. I love how they have their sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium ratios. It's like such a great little product.
Yeah.
But there are other on the market that are really great too.
Yeah.
So
I have tried everything, and I think salt stick works best for me. So I kind of want to agree with you there.
Yes. Yeah.
I've also tried the it's called Base.
Yep.
Yeah. And I was actually having trouble last year, and one of our friends who does Ironman, he just handed me his little vial. And within 15 minutes, it felt like $1 million.
It's like magic.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
And
and most people are like, I need more gels because I feel badly. And like, no, you need electrolytes. And we've seen that in the literature. In fact, Gatorade's got some research out as it relates to electrolytes and recovery. So improved recovery, making sure that you're replacing those lost electrolytes. So I had to convince one guy to buy a salt shaker.
Yeah.
He's a little older, so that generation that was like, eliminate salt. And, he had to buy one because he was such a heavy sweater.
Wow.
So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know there's been this misinformation for so long about the concern of salt and hypertension and whatnot.
Yep.
But we know that you actually need to have salt to have a healthy cardiovascular system.
Yes. And some people genetically do not respond to low sodium diets. Their blood pressure is going to be high no matter what.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So
that's definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yes, for sure.
Have you had clients where no matter what you've done, they continue to cramp and have these issues?
There are a handful, but most of them, it pretty much goes away. And I think it comes to that combination of, okay, did we nail the electrolytes? And then also, what was your intensity and what was the length?
Exactly.
So it may have been like their first Ironman and it was excessively hot. And we did a really good job with our electrolytes, but like they were going a little faster and it was a little hotter and it was a little longer than they're used to. So, the body's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And it's funny how one race can vary so much in performance to another, even though they've done exactly the same things.
Yep.
Maybe similar conditions. And yet it's like, oh my God.
Yes.
I bonked when I didn't think I was going to bonk.
Yes. And there's some psychological factors that play into how your digestion and absorption works.
Right.
So a lot of people don't, they think of mental training of like, I don't need a sports psychologist. I'm so good.
Right.
I'm like, well, do you get stressed out on race day? Because that's affecting your digestive system and parasympathetic nervous system. That
Everything cascade.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's talk more about micronutrient testing.
Yeah.
Tell me exactly what your process is there at Endurance Ridge for how you walk people through this type of test for their athletics performance.
Yes. So if people really want to get much more dialed in from a precision nutrition perspective, then we'll see, okay, you're training for ultras, you're training for Ironman, you're training for marathon. You don't have to be training for anything, honestly. You might just want to see like what's your micronutrient status based on like how much stress you're under and that kind of thing. So we place the order and they get a box delivered to their house, and then they go to a phlebotomist. They get the draw. Usually it takes about a week or two for the information to come back, and it's like 30+ page report, and it does all of your main vitamins. It does your branched chain amino acids, a lot of your antioxidants like CoQ10, selenium, as well as an omega-3 profile. So then we can see, okay, what's going on inside the cell, what's going on outside the cell. Are we actually absorbing the nutrients that we need to absorb? And based on the amount of activity or the amount of stress you're under or whatever, how's your body doing?
Right.
And do we need to optimize short term? Like, do we need to kind of beef up on our supplements a little bit, at least for short term? And then hopefully kind of that sort of, it's not intended to have you on this incredible supplement regimen or, differences in food for life, but there might be something in combination with genetic testing, like vitamin D, for example. Some of us have a genetic SNP that affects our ability to absorb vitamin D from sunlight. So that's kind of one of those that, regardless of what your micronutrient testing says, we're going to have to be on a pretty permanent dose. And then we work through various functional nutrition things that we can do, from food to supplements, and, making sure they're being compliant and not, walking around with a giant box of supplements.
Red pills, just like.
Yes, exactly. We try to really be, judicious in how we serve people and making sure that they're also not spending too much money and, so it's a really interesting process to see, also because we don't want to do it within 6 months of each other. So like what happens in month 1, then you're training for Ironman, 6 or 9 months later, let's test it again. How did we do through that like stressful process of training?
Super baseline.
So correct. Yeah. In a perfect world, I would love to see that everybody could get micronutrient testing on a yearly basis, because their like repeat reports are also really cool. It'll show them, the differences and changes.
That's interesting. And I would imagine that over time, as we get older, that we have more or less propensity towards absorbing certain nutrients and micronutrients. So just as an everyday, or for the everyday person, the athlete, this is actually this is a good thing to do as well. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. In fact, I just had somebody who has Crohn's, and he's also a runner, but I swear this dude lives off of meat and potatoes. I was like, bro, you ain't damn, like, we need some vegetables, but like he just can't tolerate them. So I was like, well, let's see what your micronutrient testing looks like and see where we can give you some support. I mean, honestly, he was like shockingly good.
Really?
I was like, okay, well, I'm going to keep you a secret. I mean, I'm outing him now, but anyway, so it just goes to show that everybody is just so different.
Yes.
So it was really cool.
That's really cool. So it actually might be a good way. I'm just thinking for myself, because I do a lot of activity. I have a lot of stresses from business and stuff like that and work, and how I can actually optimize myself in my 40s.
Yeah.
This is actually a good way to go.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, especially, and women, especially, if same kind of thing, like if you're not menopausal yet, like start it now. Let's see how things go over time, right? Yeah. So the more data that you can have on yourself, assuming that you're not going to obsess over it, if you have somebody who helps you interpret it, it makes my job easier. Right. So like I've got a client right now who's coming to me and she's got like CGM data and she's got all this. I'm like, yes, we're totally going to nail this. And she's like, oh my gosh, somebody would finally like put all the pieces together. I'm like, get excited by this kind of stuff.
Cool. So then it's funny because we're also obsessed with the macros that we do forget the micronutrients.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you find that there's some commonality among triathletes where they tend to be depleted or tend to not have a lot of certain kinds of micronutrients that they should be aware of?
Yeah. So typically we'll see quite a few B vitamin B vitamins be depleted, which are your sort of energy releasing. They sort of assist in that process. So oftentimes B vitamins, especially if somebody's on what we now call a plant-based diet, which, vegetarian or vegan, same kind of thing there. Certain antioxidants can be a little bit more depleted in triathletes. And then certain amino acids are some of those things that I more typically see.
Like leucine, alanine kind of thing.
Yep, exactly. Or glutathione, especially if there's, some of your antioxidants, glutamine, another one. So those are kind of the things that we'll see on the lower side. Omega-3s, I've not really seen anybody as a super rock star in that department. So we definitely need some work on our omega-3s for sure. And they assist with recovery and inflammation and all kinds of cool stuff. So those are some that across the board I typically see a lot.
Now I am a huge fan of creatine for not just recovery from lifting heavy weights, but also for brain health.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Because I've been trying to tell my triathlete friends to take creatine.
That's a hard sell. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that as a,
I love creatine.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Everyone heard that, right? You heard it from Chris Newport, the coach.
Yes. I mean, it's super safe. It's one of the most heavily researched supplements on the market. Everything from TBIs to kids to, as long as you're staying well hydrated. Most triathletes don't necessarily see an immediate impact or something like, well, what's it doing for me? So I would prefer to take these other things, and that's okay. But certainly vegans and vegetarians, that's a good thing. And if you are lifting, for sure.
Yes.
If you want to gain weight, now I know everybody's gonna freak out. Oh, well, I don't want to gain weight, so I'm not gonna take it. Like it assists in that process, but so yeah, it's generally recognized as safe, and it's an awesome product.
I love it too.
Yeah.
So, as far as vegans and vegetarians, I want to help our audience out there who are people who are non-meat eaters. How do we help them to make sure they get enough protein and other nutrients into their system? I know obviously the V's are going to be mostly in meat, but aside from supplements, are there vegetables of any kind that they can actually make sure they're overloading on or getting more of?
Yeah. So the good old lentils, give her a little play. And poor soy. I mean, it just gets really
bad.
Yeah. There's just so much crazy research on it, but I mean, it's really a good product. But yeah, soy, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds. But yeah, oftentimes I have to get my vegans or vegetarians to do some sort of a protein powder.
Yeah.
And that can, there are plenty of good ones out on the market.
They would have to probably take some iron too.
That depends. Iron's a little bit of a beast. Just depends on whether they're menstruating or not. And then what's the rest of their diet look like?
Right.
So is there I've seen a few men with low iron. It's typically my runners who are like 60 plus miles a week. So they're breaking down those red blood cells very rapidly, and they just can't replenish them fast enough. So sometimes I'm trying to convince them to kind of back off their volume a little bit just so that their body can catch up.
Yeah.
But I have seen on occasion somebody who might have a little bit of internal bleeding, like hemorrhoids or something, that's bleeding, but they don't know it. So they're losing some, and then they need to put it back in.
Yeah.
But then it's a matter of you got to stop the bleeding.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. So you can't just shove iron in your face and be like, it's fixed. So
it's like a leaky hose.
Yes. So and iron's tricky because it can be very very bad to overload on.
Absolutely.
So
that's my worry there. But I kind of wonder with vegans and vegetarians if they need to be extra careful not getting enough into their system.
Yeah, for sure. As long as they're combining a lot of their food, like beans and rice, things like that. So they're optimizing their amino acids and then their absorption, and they're not combining higher in iron foods with higher in vitamin D and calcium foods. So those compete for the same binding sites. So for a vegetarian, if they're having some yogurt, you don't want to have an iron supplement then. So that's, zinc is another one that tends to be lower in my vegans and vegetarians. But again, going back to some of those B vitamins, sometimes that can be low. And I know people are like, well, let's just take the latest fad supplement. And sometimes that can be, there's a particular product that we've seen a couple of people on that their micronutrients show up real wacky.
Oh, really?
Having taken that. Yeah. So just know, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but just, just know, like, do your homework, ask questions, look at the labels. And if you don't know, seek one of us out, seek out a dietitian to like help you, like, hey, this is what my diet looks like. Is it, should I be taking this? We'll help you out.
That's cool. Now, I do want to talk also about testosterone. And obviously, this is a rapidly depleting hormone in our bodies as we get older, especially men or women.
Yep.
And the concern out there is, oh, well, should I be taking testosterone as a supplement? And I keep telling people that from my understanding of it, it's a very low dosage compared to what makes roid heads they are.
Yeah.
And for anyone, especially an endurance athlete, I'm thinking that would actually help in the recovery. I don't know how you stand on that.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a conversation with a woman from Bicycling Magazine on protein. So this goes back to protein.
Oh, yes.
Right? So like we need that in order to have an appropriate hormonal response to exercise. So I mean, having a good conversation with your doctor and making sure that you've got somebody who understands what you're doing, because so many physicians are seeing really sick people and they need that support, but they're not really getting the athlete. So make sure your physician is somebody who gets that. And knowing that, I'm doing a lot of hard stuff on my body. Like, can I have a little extra support to make sure, especially if you're super, super tired.
Yeah. It's funny because the backlash I've heard from physicians, patients have told me that, well, I talked to my doc about this, but they're like, oh, we don't want you to get, really, the steroid kind of thing.
Yeah.
But really, it just sounds like a misunderstanding of the benefits of that can actually help a patient, especially if they're lacking this and they can't access their free testosterone.
Yep. Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah.
So, and I know we were talking about beforehand, like a good functional medicine practitioner, we do functional nutrition, but we don't go at it alone. So when it comes to hormones and whatnot, we're going to do the best that we can to optimize hormones through diet and nutrition, but like we're not the ones writing the script for testosterone.
Right.
Like
exactly.
we pass that off.
Yeah.
But it's important. I mean, to your point about recovery and then just the general aging process, and we want to be awesome for life.
Absolutely.
So.
And you would also agree that women also, they tend to not understand that they actually need testosterone.
Absolutely. It's a very fine balance between the various hormones in a women's system. But yes, we need the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all that is important.
So women out there, don't be afraid of the T.
No, don't be afraid of testosterone at all. Yeah.
So talk to me about... There's so much data or information out there, I'll just say again, where it's like, hey, for proper recovery after races or after workouts, whatnot, there's a small window of time that you need to take all these macros in there. There's certain ratios of carbohydrates to protein that you can take. Are all these true, or where is
I feel so
truth?
bad for you guys.
We do this all the time, so like we got to make sure we get all the facts right for our clients too. Because I don't want to tell them that it's this ratio when it's really that ratio.
Yeah,
ratios don't even matter.
I don't really use ratios honestly in my practice. What we've seen is post hard effort, like a very intense or a very long exercise bout or a race, that your glycogen stores are the most optimally repleted. So glycogen is stored energy in your muscle and your liver. And that's why you take in, to not bonk, that's why you take in things like sports drinks and cookies and dates or whatever it is that you take in while you're exercising over 90 minutes to spare that glycogen. So your body's ability to restore it is kind of peaking right about 30 minutes.
So there's truth to that.
Yes, there is truth to that. But I see a lot of athletes who, as soon as they're done, they're like, getting their shaker bottle out. I'm like, okay, calm down. Like, relax a minute. Let your body cool down. And I've seen this multiple times at races, like athletes are like, I'll finish. Let me drink my chocolate milk. And like 10 minutes later, it's all over the floor. So let your body cool down. Maybe go grab a shower or whatever, and then you're having the carbohydrates afterwards, the window of time for protein to optimize muscle protein synthesis is more like an hour and a half to 2 hours. But like in what convenient world do we, we're like, okay, 30 minutes and let me have my banana. And then, an hour later, like, let me have my piece of chicken. Like most of us want to combine that.
Yeah.
So for convenience sake, if it's like having a protein shake or having chocolate milk, that was a big thing, 5-10 years ago, right?
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I can't even have it because my lactose.
Yes, I did. The majority of the world is. Anyway, but a lot of our milks are now like, they now have lactase in them.
Yes.
So the enzyme. But anyway, some people still can't tolerate it, and that's fine. It oftentimes works out to have a protein and carbohydrate combination in 30 minutes afterwards, just because it's convenient. And then hopefully maybe 2-3 hours later, you're having your meal.
Right.
Because a steady influx of essential amino acids is ideal. And then the amount of glycogen that you need to replace is dependent on a person's size. Right. So the bigger you are, the more you've depleted, the more you need to take in. And as long as you're getting somewhere between 15 and 30 grams of protein in that post-workout period, again, this is like if you just did like your normal jog around the block, don't waste your time. Yeah. Just, but it's like you sit down and have breakfast afterwards, great. So yeah, I think there's this ratio thing and oh my God, like just.
It'll actually, so I find that it actually confuses people more.
Totally.
And they get stressed out and anxious that they didn't, oh my God, Mr. Wyndham.
Yes, no.
I'm going to recover. I'm going to die.
No, you're going to be okay. As long as you're getting carbs, protein, and a little bit of electrolytes, which can be had through food, which again, I mean, not to plug milk, but like, it's got potassium in it. It's got a little bit of salt in it. But you can do it through multiple avenues. Like, you can go have a sandwich and a glass of juice. God forbid you have a Coke.
Yes.
And a bag of potato chips. Like, I mean, it's not the healthiest thing on the planet, but it's sugar and it's a little bit of sodium. Yes, and it tastes good, right? And you got some potassium from your chips, and you're like, oh man, that was so delicious. So okay, great. Then a couple hours later, go have your chicken and your salad and your sweet potato, and that's fine. It's okay. Yeah.
Getting back to nutrition, are you a fan of Precision Nutrition?
I have not personally used their products, but I know of them. Yeah.
So more or less, it's like sort of another way to
approach nutrition. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about, let's get into triathlon training.
Yes.
We do have a varied audience of very beginner triathlons to very seasoned triathlons.
That's awesome.
Triathletes. And so, obviously, in a 30-minute podcast, can't go over all the intricacies, but do you find that there are aspects of training that, whether you're at this level or this level, that people kind of forget about or miss out on that they really should be incorporating into their...
I say strength and mobility. I mean, I'm plugging you, Jerry.
So glad you said that. Because I was on another show where the one gentleman had said that it was misinformation that adding strength training actually helps testosterone. I was like,
that's a hot wrong.
Thank you. Sorry for that person. I can't remember his name, but I was like, I don't.
Yeah, strength and testosterone, like strength training, very directly correlates with increases in testosterone.
Just hearing the show.
So yeah,
you're out there. So how do you incorporate strength and mobility, or even strength in particular, into a program, especially when you have so many hours you're already allocated towards endurance?
Yeah. Well, for like triathlon team, we just have separate classes. We're like, you guys are just gonna come. Sorry, that's just how it is.
Into the schedule.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've found with triathletes, they have to physically show up, or they won't do it unless they have a background in lifting and they're like, I know my way around the gym. Don't worry about me. I'm like, okay, cool. Right. But most of the people are like, what do I do with this kettlebell thing? I'm like, okay, well, let's show you.
Right.
So, because, they like to be on their bikes and they like to run and, they usually need some assistance in like swim form. So like, that's another big thing, like making sure that your form is good.
Yes.
Seeing people like you to make sure, is my run form good? Because you're going to be doing miles and miles and miles and miles. Yeah. And if you have terrible form, something's going to break.
For sure.
So
I was doing some running research with Rutgers, and one of the PIs awesome colleague of mine, we were talking about this, how a lot of the injuries that we see in running often are just result of bad technique.
Yep.
And the question, of course, was, well, who taught people how to run? And no one did.
No.
That's the biggest issue.
Yeah.
So there's a researcher in our field, Chris Powers, out at USC, where many years ago, and this was actually mind-blowing for me, where a lot of times we were thinking about from the bottom-up approach. He was like, no, we got to think about the proximal down to the distal, so from the hips down there. And that actually changed a lot of the outcomes that I saw in my runners at the time as I was employing some of these different strategies.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking, like, you know what? This is why, quote unquote, this core training is so important, because running is the most core activity you can do.
Yeah, that's your short, and your shirt says more core.
Exactly.
So.
Plugging for the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but do you find also that running form does dictate a lot of injuries in the athletes?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And in our strength training classes, like, oh, people have terrible cores. Like, I love you, triathletes. I will train you forever. But yeah, we need to work on our core, and mobility is just, and that, you know, like, it all comes together, right? You know, so like if they are sitting in a desk all day and they're a little like kyphotic and like their shoulders are rounded, like, okay, well, now we're just going to do more crunches on top of that. Like, you know, so yeah, it's core strength, mobility, all that stuff. Super important.
Cool. Do you, I'm a fan of having our triathletes go heavy when they do lift.
Yeah.
And not to be afraid of getting, oh, I don't get bulky.
Yeah.
Especially our unfortunate female athletes. So,
Yeah.
I don't want to get.
Yeah. If they saw what a bodybuilder did, they'd be like, oh, okay,
That's right.
I think we're good.
We're not doing that.
Yes. And again, it goes back to that genetic component.
Yes.
I mean, some of us can like look at a weight and like instantly have like bigger muscles. And some people just have to, you know, like really work at it. But yes, I'm a big fan of going heavy.
Awesome. I'm so glad you said that. I have that on our show as evidence for our triathletes out there.
That's right. Go big, baby. I saw a really, now granted it was a case study, but I saw a really interesting article about a triathlete who raised his VO2 max with heavy lifting. I was like, yes.
Well, do you remember Ryan Hall from back in the day?
Oh, totally. That guy is amazing.
So I posted many months ago, for anyone out, he's an Olympic runner, high level. He posted this post where it was his times before he started.
Speaking of testosterone, by the way, I'm fairly positive that his testosterone was in the tank.
Probably. Oh my God. Back in the day? Forget about it.
Yeah.
It's amazing right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, he had his times posted on this post from before he started lifting.
Yep.
And times after, and they were exactly the same.
Isn't that amazing?
Like, much more.
He's massive. Yeah. He's totally my hero.
And he didn't hurt all the time back in the day.
I know.
And now
he was a mess.
Yes.
And I'm so curious about his like kids. You know, he adopted all his kids. I was like, could he not? Right? Just speculation. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I'm, you know, like it just goes to show that a lot of people are not willing to risk adding in lifting when they have such a good thing. Like if you have a propensity for high VO2 max, which is very heavily genetic, it's like, it's risky, right? If you're like, okay, well, this is right now is working, but like, do we totally change the strategy and add in, like, do we add 25 pounds to you? Are you still going to produce these same times? It's not until after he left that he.
Now you discovered.
Yeah.
I wonder if he kicks himself in the foot, like, oh my God, if I'd done this back then.
I've seen a few, like, I don't know, other YouTube videos where he's like theorizing at what different weights and paces he could maintain. And
interesting.
Yeah. It's very fascinating. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how many more athletes out there, endurance athletes in particular, who could avoid a lot of sidelined.
Absolutely.
The fact that they're injured with some lifting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
Lift weights, people.
Yeah, this ways. We actually use something. Have you heard of BFR?
No.
I want to talk about this.
Oh, yeah.
Blood flow restriction training.
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
But
I've not personally used it.
Oh, you have?
No.
I'm gonna have to have you use it one day.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
Just to try it.
Yeah.
So it's a basically it looks like a blood pressure cuff, and it helps to without any added weight, by the way, build strength and also build muscle.
Yeah.
Because it tricks your brain to thinking that you're actually lifting 300 pounds.
Isn't that crazy?
But here's what's really cool. There's a couple studies done on VO2 max and endurance athletes and how some improved performance with crazy results.
Yeah.
So we told one of our cyclists, and this guy is like a ridiculous cyclist. He has this trip to the Rockies every year. And so we told him about the study. He's like, well, I'm going to the Rockies. So for 6 weeks, he comes in twice a week, 20 minutes on a trainer with 2 blood pressure cuffs on. He can only go, Chris, 5 miles an hour because he cannot move. It's like, oh my God. And he was literally sweating buckets.
Yeah, I bet.
Goes to the Rockies.
And like crushes it.
He crushes it.
That's
and he's
friggin'
old, by the way.
Yeah.
He's like, I've never gone up the mountains this fast.
Yeah.
So it's crazy, but a testament to like how you can actually recover as an endurance athlete with some rehab technologies that we have.
Totally.
To, without stressing your system, actually using your own body weight to do these things and also getting great results in your performance.
Yeah. Yeah. But that looks scary. Right. So yeah, totally. So people are like, wait, what are you doing to me?
Off circulation.
Yeah.
It's like, and then your leg turns purple. You're like, oh my God.
Yes.
My leg here.
Yeah. But it's like, look at the research. It's so cool.
It's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
We've used it on, we've had accelerated ACL outcomes. We had one guy who tore his LCL, MCL, and ACL.
Jeez.
And he's a...
who needs a knee anyway?
Exactly. He was a college wrestler. He went back within less than a year.
Wow.
Without any issues. It was crazy. So
that's so cool.
It's magical in the sense of like it's actually science fiction almost.
Yeah.
Like you would never think.
Yeah.
We've used a lot of this on the special operators out in the field who've gotten wounds that would otherwise amputate.
Wow.
But they've been able to salvage them.
That's so cool.
That's the wild part.
Yeah. Totally.
Cool. So lastly, I want to talk about metabolic testing. Can you talk to our athletes more what that entails?
They've probably all seen it on, YouTube or like around the Olympics when people are, running or cycling on and they've got the mask on. So every single person who comes into my lab is like, I'm so nervous, but we make people feel really comfortable. We explain it all. But yes, you do have a mask on, and basically what it's doing is measuring how much oxygen you're consuming and how much carbon dioxide you're exhaling. Yeah. So that in turn translates to how much fat you're using it as an energy source and how many carbs you're using it as an energy source. So we use that in conjunction with lactate and then sometimes with sweat too to determine where are people's zones, because the watches that are out there are pretty good at making a pretty rough estimate what your VO2 max is.
So you would say that pretty accurate?
I'd say they're probably within 2 to 5 points of what we actually get on the cart.
That's
so
solid. I was actually skeptical of my results here.
Yeah. So, but if I've got my cheat sheet anytime somebody comes in, because we ask what people's paces are, because we're going to create, it's in essence a ramp test.
Yeah.
So we start off easy, go a little harder, a little harder, a little harder, a little harder, or as hard as they possibly can. There is no beating the test. Like you will conk out at some point. Right. Hopefully you're still standing though. Knock on wood, we've never. Yeah, everybody's still standing, or seated if you're on a bike or on a rower. But you can't beat it. Basically, we're going to push you literally to your max. And the biggest complaint I hear from people is that they're just like, oh, the mask is really hard to breathe in that little section at the very end. And yeah, it's like, when do you work out at maximal capacity with a thing covering your face? You can still breathe through your nose. You can still breathe through your mouth. But that's really helpful for us to determine zone 2 in particular. So going easy, using fat efficiently as an energy source, keeping lactate nice and low. But a lot of watches can do pretty good with max, and then they can do pretty good with a field test of an FTP or a lactate threshold. Right. That's pretty easy to test, but zone 2 is really hard. So we help people literally will open up their phones and adjust their zones on their watch. Yeah. Really yeah. So, and then it helps us to determine how much fuel they need for any race, whether it be an Olympic distance, a sprint, marathon, ultra marathon, whatever. Here, if you're going to be in this zone, this is how much that you can very easily take in. You can push that limit because we can train ourselves to take in a pretty exorbitant amount, but that's usually when people come to me and then they're like, I can't eat anymore. I'm like, okay, well, if you put all the food that you tried to eat in a bucket, would you still want to eat it? They're like, oh yeah, all my gels and gummies and sports drinks. I'm like, yeah, of course your body's going to reject that. That's gross. So anyway, but yeah, we try to make people feel as comfortable as possible, and they do have a heart rate monitor on. Sometimes we'll have the sweat patches on, but basically you start off super easy, get harder, 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 and then you can't go anymore. You got to stop.
What's that timeline? It's 5-10 minutes, 15?
A quote unquote perfect VO2 max test is somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 12 minutes.
Yeah.
We extend it a little bit. So we do 3-minute stages because we want to see substrate use and we want to see heart rate come to a steady state. And then we'll drop people down for a minute. So you kind of get a little bit of a break and then they go again. But we ideally want to have somewhere between 4 and no more than 6 stages. So it does end up being long. So it may not be like, could you eke out a little bit more on your VO2 max? Like officially, sure, but that's like icing on the cake for what we try to provide for people. We're trying to provide them zones and then substrate use so that we know how much to fuel with.
Got it.
So,
and you recommend like maybe every 90 days they do retest on the metabolic testing?
If they're a newer athlete, then definitely come in like maybe every 6 months or so. We've seen some really cool transitions. So we had a guy who came in January. He started working with us. And then he came back in June, and for every given stage, same paces, or same treadmill paces, he dropped his heart rate by 10 beats.
That's
yeah. I mean, so it's basically just being more efficient.
wow.
Yeah. So one of our coaches was we were like, "What's the magic formula?"
That's right.
He's like, "Oh no."
What it?
Yeah.
So as far as training goes, I know that there's been this 80-20 kind of thing, and it's something that you also agree with.
Yep. Yeah, I would say, especially for efficiency and, building more mitochondria. I always tell people, I'm like, remember 9th grade biology? It's coming back to haunt you. Yeah, right. So, but yeah, I mean, we're endurance athletes. We got to go slow and low. Tempo is I'm not a tempo fan.
Really?
At all. Yeah. So
first coach who has told me.
Yeah, I'll use one particular athlete as my sort of case study. We were really trying to, because half Ironman in particular is just such a tricky distance.
Yeah.
It's like not fast enough to be hard, but not slow enough to be long. It's just this weird, mushy middle. So we were really trying to train him at those paces to be able to, drink and eat and, be at that heart rate, be at that zone. He literally from race to race, 1 year over another, made 0 improvements. Like literally the same exact time on the same exact course so then we backed totally off. We totally took a different strategy, went to more of the sort of Norwegian style, if you will, went super, super easy and then just like hammered it, doing these like really hard, like 30-second intervals, and FTP's gone up, like performance has improved. So, obviously that's one case study, but we need variation. That's where I like tempo to just like be something different. Right. And it's nice to do that if you need to train your gut for whatever race you might be doing. But otherwise, it's easy, or it's intervals, or it's picking up heavy things. So, yeah.
3-stage process.
Yes. Yeah. I should name that somehow. Right. The 3 to 1. I don't know. Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for all the insights you shared.
Yeah, of course.
I definitely want to stop by Endurance Edge and get a lot of this testing done just for my own knowledge.
Yeah.
And I love looking to that.
And we'll set up all the cameras. Yeah. We can make you a good
I want to be. So I'm excited to do that. Is there anything else that you like to share with our audience as far as either tips or how they can reach you? Anything like that?
Yeah, you can find us at theenduranceedge.com. We do one-on-one coaching. We've got a triathlon team. We do sports and wellness nutrition, integrative nutrition, metabolic testing, all kinds of fun stuff. So that's where you can find us. And we love what we do. So hopefully it shows. Yeah.
Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It really does mean a lot to us. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or comment if you got at least 1 or 2 helpful insights or takeaways to help you get to your next level.